Day for night exterior shots can be a very difficult thing to get right, even for big budget productions. Of course, shooting a night scene at night would be the best case scenario, but a lot of times that's not necessarily possible, again, even for those big budget productions. Look at Nope, for instance. They were shooting in such a wide open area that lighting that would be next to impossible, so they use this amazing day for night technique. But of course it happens all the time, and sometimes to massive scale like this shot from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But when you look at what gear and crew was needed to make that happen, once again, it becomes evident that doing that on an indie budget probably impossible. But the technique you choose is going to dictate the final quality of that day for night shot. You could say it would be night and day. See what I did there?
Don't make this a thing.
But you saw what I did.
I saw it, I heard it, I didn't like it.
But you saw it.
Yes, Ryan, I saw it.
Excellent. Ha-ha! With a few of our short films, we've had exterior night shoots and day for night interior shoots, which are a lot easier to pull off than exterior since you just block out all the windows. But we have shown those on the show before. However, establishing exterior shots might only be on screen for a few seconds and can sometimes warrant a day for night composite rather than the logistics and expense of shooting an actual nighttime exterior. While you can't really beat the real thing, today we'll try and turn some exterior daylight stock photos into night scenes, leading into a horror vibe because, you know, Halloween. When it comes to style, consider location. If this is out in the middle of nowhere, will the main source of light be from the moon? Or if it's from a suburban street, will it be more warm from streetlights? Or will it lean into a more classic horror vibe with fog? Typically, real night exteriors are usually shot with either a very dark to black sky and a key light aimed at the building or location. You can see this house from Insidious is lit very bright, almost similar levels to the sunlight during the day, but the angle of light, color palette, and black sky let us know instantly that this is a nighttime scene despite how bright it is, so we don't really question it. Alternatively, you could do the opposite and have the house more of a silhouette with the space behind lit up, or an overall volumetric fog look, which can use the techniques of both, lighting up the space behind to show the silhouette of the building while keeping some details and fog throughout the foreground too. We saw this shot from the recent Haunted Mansion movie and like the typical horror look as well as the blend of orange and teal from the moonlight and the practicals. So let's get into it. We'll start with this free stock image from unsplash.com. To go for the more stylized volumetric look, we first need to create multiple mats to separate different areas of the image to add depth. So we'll have the foreground area with the fence, a section of the house isolating the pillars, balcony, and steps, then the main part of the house, and lastly, these two sections of the building. In After Effects, with the image and a new comp, we're going to create a solid layer for our foreground and hide the visibility. Using the pen tool, we'll draw multiple masks around each area we want to keep in the foreground. For the fence, we do need to mask around each individual post, so this did end up taking a while to do. So now let's take a second to have an emotional tribute for Thompson and all the tedious masking he had to do. Roll it.
And I don't want the world to see me, 'cause I don't think that they'd understand. When everything's made to be broken, I just want you to know who I am.
Beautiful. Now select all the masks and increase the feather slightly. For the ground, we will use a large rectangular mask and feather it so that it tapers off behind the fence. Creating a new solid, we'll draw a simple mask for the foliage on the fence, and to make a more detailed shape, we can use turbulent displace.
Turbulent displacement, turbulent displacement.
Lowering the size, increasing the complexity and amount to distort the edges and add a lot of small details instead of having to roto all of these by hand. To bring out some of the actual plant details too, we can duplicate our image, use a tint to make black and white, and a curves to crush the contrast until we get mainly just these bright plants visible. We'll mask only this section, and then to key out the black areas, we'll use an unmult preset. The shift channels ignores our mask, so adding a set matte effect, we can change source to masks for it to enable again. Make the solids visible and pre-compose these layers together as the foreground matte, then hide again. With a new solid, we'll roto the pillars next, balconies, steps, and hanging lamp, again creating multiple masks for all of these different sections and details.
I don't want the world to see me, 'cause I don't think that they'd understand. When everything's made to be broken, I just want you to know who I am.
With 2 other solids, we're going to draw around the main sections of the house and roof, and then the last layer for these 2 remaining sections of the building at either side of the house. But hold on. Have you heard about Printful? If you are a creator of any kind, you know how difficult it can be to generate revenue streams, and merchandise is a great way to add a new one, especially around the holidays. It also adds a way to connect with your audience and grow. However, printing and shipping said merch can be a massive hassle, but that's where Printful comes in. It's what we use to print and ship everything in our store, including some of our newer shirts. And they just launched their new membership program, which will help us grow even faster. With a free 14-day trial, the $24.99 a month Printful Growth membership allows you to get product discounts of up to 30% and 7% off branding placement, like inside labels and sleeve prints. And once you hit a certain volume, you get a free membership for the entire next year. The Growth membership will pay off with just a few orders, and as you scale, you can grow into the Printful Business tier, which offers even higher discounts and extra perks like free digitization and a higher sample order discount. So learn more about the membership through our link in the description below and apply for the 14-day free trial.
And now, on with the show. And now, on with the show.
Do you like plants? Well, we got extras, and for those extra plants, we'll copy and paste the foliage. How was that? I feel like
No, that was great.
I feel like that we just keep going.
Yeah,
Like, don't even cut this.
I'm not.
For some extra plants, we'll copy and paste the foliage solid from the foreground pre-comp, delete the old masks, and draw some new areas. Enable visibility for both these solids and pre-compose as the house sides. Now that that's complete, we have multiple maps for different depths of our image. And while we want to keep these all individual, we also want to combine versions for placing things behind the house. So we'll duplicate all, enable visibility, pre-compose as full alpha matte, then hide again. To darken our scene, we're going to create an adjustment layer and use a couple of curves effects, really lowering the overall brightness and adding some contrast, then using a tint effect at around 50% strength to lower the saturation. We'll add a new adjustment layer for our sky with the curves again to darken, then using the full alpha matte comp as an invert map to darken the background. On another adjustment layer, we'll mask around these top windows and again use curves to darken, closely matching the ground floor windows. To add some areas of highlights and moonlight like we see in the reference image here, we'll duplicate our base image and move it below the Windows adjustment layer. Using a set matte effect, we will choose the full alpha matte layer, set the blending mode to screen, add a tint to lower saturation, and use a couple curves effect to change brightness and contrast, keeping an eye on sections of the roof area that we'll mask to keep. We can use a CC light sweep effect, changing direction, boosting width, lowering sweep intensity, and changing edge intensity and thickness to add a rim light to the edge. We'll duplicate and move it to a different area and use some simple masks and feather to isolate different areas we want to keep. To add highlights to the pillars, we'll duplicate the highlight layer and delete the mask, change the set matte layer and switch to use masks so that we isolate it to just the front house area. To not affect the foreground, we'll duplicate the set matte effect and change the layer to our foreground matte comp, but switching it to inverted. We'll place this below the light sweep effect though, as not to have them add highlights to the inverted matte areas. We'll alter the curves effect slightly, then once again mask different areas to add or subtract and use more duplicated light sweep effects placed and angled in different areas to add pops of light. We also lowered the opacity on this layer. With one last duplicate, we will change the first set matte to use our foreground matte comp and delete the second inverted version so that we have just the foreground highlights visible. We'll again delete all masks and some light sweep effects, then draw new feathered masks for sections we want to keep and remove, eventually giving us this. To add some practical lighting from the windows and lamps instead of just brightening the overall image, we're going to use stock images from unsplash.com. We found this one with a bunch of windows we can isolate. And to start, we're going to need to fix the angle. So drop it into its own comp and use CC power pin, moving points until the windows line up more square on. You can also use a grid if you need to line things up accurately. Now drop this windows comp into our main, set the blending mode to screen, and add a few effects to lower the brightness and saturation until we have this more minimal version. Next, we're going to cut around a window, boost the feather, and press Ctrl-Alt-Home to move the anchor point to the center. Place this over one of the house's windows and add more masks if needed. On duplicates, you can move the position over another window. Then using the anchor point tool, you can click and drag the image while keeping the mask in the same location. We did this for multiple windows, sometimes changing rotation, masking curtains, and using foreground mats for lower windows. Then going back to adjust the curves and hue effects on some individually. We also used a couple other stock images to add a few more practical lights in different areas until we had this. Now we'll duplicate one of the highlight layers, delete the masks, brighten one of the curves effects, delete the light sweeps, and mask around an area we want to be affected by the lights from our windows and lamps. Now we're going to use new curves to push the reds and lower the blues to match the warmth from our practical lights. Then we're going to continue to mask different areas that we want to have as sections of warm light. We'll duplicate and change the set mat to the front of the house, again deleting masks and drawing new ones over a bunch of different areas to be lit up from our practical lights. We used multiple duplicates for different areas and lots of masks until we had this. For fog, we're going to be using a few of these great assets from actionvfx.com. Drop one into the comp and set to screen. We're going to use the foreground mat and invert it to place behind the fence, then reposition. Using curves, we're going to darken it down, then duplicate the layer, move it in the timeline to find a new part, change the curves, and reposition. We'll mask and feather some sections that we want to keep. Then we're going to use more curves for contrast and to add a warmer tone as if it is being illuminated by the practical lights. We'll drop another fog asset in front, lower it, and use a high feathered mask, subtracting the bottom to make it less solid. We'll again use curves to change brightness and contrast, and to make this fog more dense, we can add some blur behind it. To do this, we're going to duplicate the fog for a matte, boost the brightness, and hide visibility. With a new adjustment layer placed beneath both of these front fog layers, we'll choose the duplicate fog as a luma matte and use a fast box blur with a boosted radius. This makes the fog feel more dense, but we're going to lower that layer's opacity to split the difference. The next fog asset we'll place behind the house using full alpha matte pre-comp, and again using curves and changing opacity, then duplicating and using the feathered mask for a brighter section above, assuming there is a source of light up there hitting the roof. To add some faint tree silhouettes, we can use another stock image, again using the full house as an alpha inverted matte, reposition, use a tint and curves for contrast, then set the blending mode to multiply. Changing the opacity of the background fog will give different vibes and can lean more into whimsical or surreal horror. To get closer to the final look of our reference, we'll use a new adjustment layer and curves effect to lower the red and boost the blue. To keep the warmth of our windows the correct color, we'll grab all of the window lamps and warm highlight layers and move them above the top of the comp, above that blue color. With another adjustment layer, we'll use Red Giant's optical glow, changing some of these settings to get a subtle wash of glow. Duplicating this will make the spread even wider and use the foreground matte inverted to feel like a hazy atmosphere. We used a couple more copies, playing with different settings and strengths until we had this. We finished this with a final grade to match our reference, a simple camera tilt, and some grain, and obviously you can change just a few things to get different looks depending on the style you are going for, just by changing opacity or disabling certain layers or even just swapping background images. We also tried a couple other stock photos too using similar techniques, so give it a go and tag us on Twitter and Instagram with your results. But that's it for today. If you're not subscribed, consider doing that and hit the bell so you're notified when we put up more content. But until next time, don't forget to write, shoot, edit, repeat.